My name is Emily Gillis. I live in Calgary, Alberta, and I have a company called Scapes by Emily, and I make little indoor gardens and terrariums. I have a shop at the market on McLeod. It's a farmer's market, and I'm there and I sell my beautiful little Scapes. My business is about a year and 8 months old now. Since September 2015, I sort of went full-time and I've been going hard ever since. What I do is quite unique in terms of the layering and the base, and so I sort of have this style that sort of reinvents the terrarium and it makes it a little more modern. So people have really gravitated towards what my style looks like. So in some ways it's a new product, but at the same time it's something from the olden days, our heritage terrariums. I've been quite surprised by the response, and this city is very big when it comes to a retail or a small local business. Tom from Biopod came to my shop at the market on McLeod and really liked my work and sort of saw a comparison between my work and his work. And upon seeing Biopod, it's very clear that we do something very similar, but in terms of having Biopod's more automated system, it's something that I'm not able to do with my work. It's really cool to sort of have the opportunity to marry our two styles together. What I'll be doing in the Eden today, I think, is a more terrestrial biopod, which doesn't include the water in the base for fish. What I'm gonna do is, I've got this piece of bark here that I would love to work with and feature in the middle of the biopod. And I'm going to dress it up with some moss and some beautiful tropical plants, as well as some air plants. So right now the back serves as a beautiful sort of living wall. So what I'm doing right now is I'm throwing the sphagnum moss into these little compartments here so that it gives me a bit of a good base to work with. And then I'll be adding some moss and sort of make it a bit of a jungly background for the display. The sphagnum moss also allows any plants that I plant back there to gather nutrients. So it's a good alternative to using soil if you don't need to use it. So this is some really high quality sphagnum moss from New Zealand, which unfortunately in my work I don't use because all my work is very open, and so I don't have the luxury of keeping up the humidity. I don't work with moss in general, actually, just planted plants. This is my full-time gig right now, actually. Yep, my background is in geology. I went to the University of Calgary here from 2005 to 2009. And after I graduated, I worked in the oil and gas industry downtown Calgary for a number of years, actually. My background really is quite nature specific. I love to be, in the mountains looking at the natural rocks and formations out there. And in my own work, in my Scapes, that's where the layering sort of comes in. So I can sort of feature what's happening underneath the surface of the earth. So the Eden is a great biopod for growing plants. That's my focus in my business, is sort of enjoying the plant life. And so the Eden has a great visual effect with this back wall that I'm working on right now. And it's also got its own filtration system in the back where it takes the water up from the bottom and cycles it through the back wall here. And the sphagnum moss and all the other plants in there can act as a natural filtration that keeps your whole biopod looking beautiful years and years ahead. Why terrariums? Well, if you've ever made one, you'll understand the appeal and the allure of both making them and enjoying them after the fact. It's wonderful to be able to bring in, a bit of just a slice of nature into your own home, just even as simple as having a house plant in there. But the allure for me with terrariums is to be able to emulate as close to nature as possible. So even right down to the rocks and the decor that I use is all natural, and so you really get the full effect. Terrariums are just a wonderful way to enjoy nature in your own home. I think what people sort of get missed on is the fact that terrariums are really a 4D art, in that they're like songs or dancing, and that they have to sort of be enjoyed over time. It's not just some 3D art sitting there forever and it won't change. Terrariums and Scapes, they change over time and they evolve, so there's beauty in the evolution of them. I listen to a lot of music when I'm working. I love to listen to audiobook tapes, actually. For some reason, when I listen to audiobook tapes or audiobooks on Audible or any other sort of app, I tend to infuse the stories into my work. When I see them again, or when I bring them into the shop to sell or to chat with people about, they just sort of take on a different sort of feel altogether. So it's a neat concept. So yeah, I certainly like to listen to music. I'll listen to some book tapes or even the odd Netflix show. So I think at this point I've got the sphagnum moss in, so we've got a good base going. And this is my wood feature, so what I want to do is sort of plan around this in terms of what's looking out from the back. So then I'm going to put some moss around it and sort of plant some plants in and around the back for a beautiful living wall. So as much as I put all that sphagnum moss in the back, I'm going to take out some bits so that I can put my plants into the little compartments so they have some place to live. I am attaching my bigger sort of droopy plants onto the back wall with some of these lovely clips here, and they'll go right into the back. And then I'm going to put my moss sort of around it and decorate. So I like to plant my bigger plants first, so then I can work around the soil and the roots and whatnot. Sort of just finesse my way into looking natural and well attached. Using English ivy or Hedera ivy with these little guys because they are wonderful creepers. They grow really fast and they're not affected by high humidity. So they're really good for sort of those higher humidity spots. You know, they grow wonderfully in the base of trees and things like that. Wonderful ground creeper as well. So I'm going to use them on the wall and probably on the floor of my Biopod. I learned about all the plants that I work with through trial and error. I think there's a lot to be said about trying your hand at something, experimenting, see what works, see what doesn't. Just a variety of tropicals that just do so well in sort of more enclosed spaces like terrariums are. So I know that the longevity is there with them. I do work with a lot of succulents as well because they are drought tolerant. In our cold and dry Calgary weather, they tend to do really well, so I've had a lot of success with those. A few of the most important things that I've learned through my experience with my terrarium building is that nature has a way of just working out at the end. And so when I do my workshops, you know, a lot of people are quite, you know, hesitant to jump right in and I don't know what I'm doing, or I'm not going to make them as good as yours. But terrariums, not only are you working with live things, you're also allowing nature to just do its thing and trust the process, really. I love to sort of see other people's approaches when I do my workshops. My workshops are almost 100% creative based. I'm not up there teaching you step by step what to do. You have your own vessel to work with that you've chosen and all your own plants, and so you really get to do what you think is best for your own terrarium. Without fail, every single person who was hesitant at first, that jumped right in and did their own, loved it at the end of the day. In terms of making plants sort of thrive long term, a few things are really important. In my work, you always need to have a basal layer of sand or rocks so that the plants are sort of raised up from the base, so that any excess water doesn't cause the plants to rot in that standing water. So that's definitely step one. Step two would be to not mix plants that don't really work together. They're not very compatible. Lots of plants require different needs in terms of watering and things like that. For example, you can't really mix tropicals with succulents because the watering needs are very different. So in order to have a very successful terrarium, you don't want to mix the two plant types together. My favorite types of plants, actually, it comes and goes because, you know, there's just a wonderful combination of tropicals would sort of suit the vessel that I'm working with. I'm inspired by the vessel, the container that I'm working with. And so depending on what I've got in front of me, I'll use different types of plants. In terms of, you know, just general interest, air plants are so big here in Calgary. And they're just very obscure, very unique, and very lovely little plants that you can do anything with because they don't have roots. I've got all the moss that I want back in there, so I'm going to see how this is framed. So my plan was to have the ivy sort of grow past here, down there, and this guy will grow just around these pieces here and sort of fill in. So I think that's where it's going to stay. I love how it's butted up against the back, and even the moss might grow on some of the back pieces here. Right now I'm going to add the basil rocks to the bottom of the Biopod. I'm going to use the black rocks because I want to draw the eye to the top and the main part. Right now I am moving all the rocks into place. I want to cover up all the sort of hardware of Biopod, covering up all the tubes and making just a really good base for a very natural effect. So this basil paneling here allows the water to filter through without any substrate going through. Let's see how my wood looks in there. So I think at this point I'm going to keep it in there from now on. It's going to be set. Love this purple Persian shield. It's one of my absolute favorite plants. Depending on the light too, it goes darker and lighter purple. So brighter the light, the darker it gets. Sometimes in my own work at home, I'll sort of set my plants around and see how they work out first, and sort of design it that way. And then once you're happy with the setup, you take them out of their pots and actually plant them up. It's important to think about sort of the growth style of the plants as well. So for example, these two they grow up and out. So each node of leaves has 2 leaves coming out of it. So these guys are really good for height. So building height over time. And then we've got the ground creepers or the bushy plants like the English ivy that will just more spread out. So I'm going to put this guy in front there. And then somewhere back there, I'm going to have the purple guy and then my begonia on the left here. So they'll fill in as they go. Unlike typical terrariums that include all-purpose soil or a tropical mix for the plants, I'm going to take the sphagnum moss and sort of blanket it around the roots. Gives it sort of a more full look. So unlike the living wall, I'm just going to place this sort of on the floor of the sphagnum moss there like that. No need to clamp it in. Okay, so I've got a bit of dead space here. I've got some rocks I'm going to sort of add to my work. All right, I think I'm probably ready for one of the last steps, adding in our air plants. I've got a variety of little air plants here. Air plants are a pretty general term for plants that take nutrients out of the air. They don't have any roots. They're just a bulbousy thing with lots of nice fronds on it. Ionathea, Tillandsia, and the Medusa kind is what I've got in front of me today. So they're all the same sort of type of air plant, but they just have different sort of growth patterns. They're a wonderful complement to any sort of tropical plants that you've got as well, because of the watering needs. Get in the way of the succulents either, so you can put them both together. So I think I'm going to put this Medusa guy near the back as well, because it's sort of definitely awkward looking, but very, very charming in itself. And I love them in clumps, so I like to put some of the green ones together and that one there together. When working with air plants at home, you don't want to use a hot glue gun. Lots of people think that's something to use to attach them or secure them to wood pieces and whatnot. Might come in handy right now if you think about it, but it's definitely not good for the plants. So don't use a hot glue gun. If you can, try to use some of these little lamps if you can, or even twist ties work well. I'm just going to put this guy down here, I think. And I think at this point I'm just going to decorate with some moss where we've got some open bits here, because that will grow in nicely, hopefully. So I think it's at this point where either less is more, or you can keep tinkering. I always say that in my workshops.